In this section, we would understand demography. We would also understand the demography versus population studies. What is the difference? So this class would revolve around certain important topics. For example, the nature and scope of understanding population studies and demography, the major conferences, the history, its relation to other disciplines, and some of the terminologies like population dynamics, population studies, population education, sciences, and so on. And similarly goes with family planning. So as we proceed, we would understand these terms thoroughly. Now, what is population? Simply stated, wherever you find a set of organisms or set of human beings, for the sake, you would consider this as a population. So even with the case of animals, plants, flora, fauna, we say that there is a group, and that's what is called as population. Now, when we say there was a war, these wars can decimate a generation of man, and this happened when you had the World War I, World War II, discoveries of new medicines, betterment in the healthcare infrastructure actually reduced the rate of mortality, and therefore this was considered as a boon for demography. Now, demography, when we are understanding what exactly it is, I can simply say demography is a scientific study of population. So when you are studying population in a scientific way, you need to understand the levels, the trends. These are based on records, surveys. Now these records could be birth record, death record, the registrations, all of these would be part of the scientific study. So what you would come to know under demography is the size, the composition, the distribution of the population, and all these three components changing on 5 parameters. These are fertility, mortality, marriage, migration, and social mobility. So there are 5 factors or 5 processes that lead to this change, and this 5 factors includes the birth, the death, marriage. These three are considered as part of the vital statistics, as we would study later, and there are various parameters that govern this vital statistics or indicators. And then there is migration and social mobility. So 5 of the things are part of the study of demography. Now, when we talk about demography, we have certain terms that we come across. So, count. What is count? It's the absolute number. So, there are 5 people standing. I count them as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? What is the rate? Rate is the frequency of an event in a particular time period. So, let's say how many cyclones have occurred in 2023. Now, this is the rate. How many? So, we are talking about frequency in a particular time period, right? Now, what is ratio? Ratio is the proportion of one set of population to the other set or the complete set. So, for example, I talk about females to the total population. So, this is the ratio of female population to the total population. And then we come across proportion. It is like how many females are there per total population is to how many males are there per total population, right? And this is the proportion. Constant is a unchanging number. So whenever we talk about, let's say, birth rate, death rate, we multiply it by 100, we multiply it by 1000, we multiply it by 1 lakh sometimes. We would understand as we proceed with the various indicators under fertility and mortality. But this fixed number that you are multiplying is what? It is nothing but a constant. So constant is an unchanging arbitrary number that you have assumed for your convenience or for the simplicity purpose. The next is cohort measure and period measure. Cohort is an event that occurs to a cohort. Now, cohort is a group of people which share the same demography. Now, when I say they share the same demography, in what terms? It could be a school class cohort where everyone is born in, let's say, 2010. It could be a marriage cohort where everyone got married in 2020. So these are cohort. They are sharing the same demography. And then there is a period measure. Period means it measures the events occurring to all of the population during a given period of time. So, during a given period of time, when the things are occurring to the whole population, we call it as a period measure. For example, if I say in 1997, there were so many births per thousand, right? So it's during this period of 1997. I'm not talking about a set of people who have common characteristics, but a duration that is common for all. So we call that as a period measure. So note, there is a difference between a cohort measure and a period measure. Clear so far? Coming on to how the concept of demography came into existence. So demography concept started with the ideas laid down by John Grant, and John Grant actually talked about the concept back in 1620 to 1674 where he lived, and therefore he talked about the records maintained in the churches, and these records were for the birth, the death, the marriage, and this started somewhere around the 15th century. So he brought his famous work, which was known as the natural and political observations of the bills of mortality, right? The natural and the political observations of the bills of mortality. And under this work, his main idea was to focus on demographic studies. The word demography itself comes from two words, demo and graphy. Demo means population and graphy means to describe. So when we talk about geography, for example, it's describing the earth. Geo means earth. So here we are describing the population. So all things which relate to describing the population is studied under demography. And then John Grant talked about predominantly three things: fertility, that's the birth rate; mortality, the death rate; and marriage, and said that, and migration, and all these three things were interrelated in the terms that they are based on definite postulates. So according to him, a male birth in a society is greater than a female birth always. The mortality rate in urban area is greater than the mortality rate in rural areas, and those were some of his findings that he laid down. So demography actually talks about a scientific way to explain the population, and Gouliard said that this concept was more scientifically put forward